Good evening, rockers. Vegas Rock got us here on the rocks. Total entertainment. Coming to you live from somewhere off the Las Vegas Strip. Today, we are interviewing an amazing artist from Minnesota, Johnny O'Neill. This is his third album coming out. He has an amazing rock and roll band. So we're gonna get to know Johnny O'Neill this morning, and stay tuned. All right, we are ready for Johnny O'Neill, so let's let him in. Hey, Johnny,
Hey, Carol. How's it going?
how are you?
I am doing well,
Well,
quite
welcome,
well. How
welcome to
about
On
yourself?
the Rocks, Total Entertainment. I'm here in Las Vegas, and you're in Minnesota, correct?
That's correct. Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul. Yep.
Yeah, I'm originally from Chicago, so I'm a Midwest girl. So
Uh-huh.
I've been to Minnesota quite a few times driving through there as well. But yeah, I actually listened to your record.
Well,
Um
that's wonderful. I
yeah,
appreciate that. Thank you.
and it's really amazing. Your band is really good, and you guys have a, to me, like a rock and roll sound, almost kind of I wouldn't say 70s kind of inspired, but it's really bluesy as well.
I liken us to we're trying to do a modern mashup of the Stones meets Zeppelin, essentially.
Yes. And
That's
you
what we're
guys are
going
doing
for.
a good job because it's really a great record.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, we put a lot of heart and soul into it and really swinging for the fences with this one and trying to really expand the sonic landscape of the band and take the listeners on journeys that we certainly have the two guitar hard rock thing that's in our DNA, of course, but
Oh, yeah.
we want to do far more than that. And there's plenty of other bands that are great at doing that too, but in terms of really trying to expand the sonic palette, if you will. That was one of the main goals with the record. So,
Well,
and I
great.
apologize if I've some noise out here. My
Oh,
I'm at home. My lawn guy's out, and
it's
it's just
okay.
service
No worries.
to do the lawn at the present time. So
But
anyway,
hey, let's get to the nitty gritty of your band because there's a lot of people out there, a lot of my followers that aren't familiar with you or your band. So
sure.
let's get back to the beginning of how you started this rock and roll journey.
Well, that would have to go back to the band I started with my blood brother Brian Bart. We were a couple of upstart 18-year-olds some time ago. That was a band called Dare Force. We went on to have an 11-year run through the late 80s. We played 11 years, 50 weeks a year, 4 or 5 shows a week for 11 years straight. Played all over the Midwest, Canada, headline shows in Puerto Rico, Venezuela, opened for everyone from Kiss, Rat, Ted Nugent, Triumph, Kansas, Joe Perry. I mean, I could go on and on and on. We released 3 albums in the 80s, self releases. Had some substantial airplay here in the Midwest on a number of stations. Came extremely close a number of times to getting signed, but at some point I had made to digress a little bit. I actually dropped out of high school after 10th grade. I started playing clubs in Minneapolis when I was 14 years old. So I've been at this a long time. Brian and I started the band when I was 18. Well, I made a promise to myself that if we hadn't achieved total fame and fortune by the time I was in my late 20s, it was going to be Plan B. So I proceeded to go from a GED to a PhD in clinical psychology from the Ohio State University. So I took quite a detour throughout the 90s. I was in Columbus for most of the 90s, came back early 2000s, reformed Dare Force with a new lineup, actually put out a fourth album back in 2018 called Calling Your Name. Um, the band came to an end just around the time of the pandemic. And so I was kind of scratching my head. I thought, well, Dare Force has had its day, a wonderful ride, but it was time to take another step in my musical journey. And so I was talking with Brian, who's one of my best friends to this day, and I said, any thoughts? He goes, why don't you record a solo album? And it's something I thought about doing, for years, but finally had the opportunity, and certainly a global pandemic was a prime time to, put the nose to the grindstone and write some tunes. And so I put out my first solo album, Truth or Dare, that was released in January of 2021. It was recorded throughout 2020. And the album features just myself and my current drummer, Joe Becker. I actually had recorded all the tracks. I do all the vocals, all guitars, bass, slide, lead, acoustic. The only other two musicians that are on the album are Joe on drums, and then we had the pleasure of having Danny Peyronel, who's the original keyboardist for UFO, on 3 tracks on the album. But otherwise, it's essentially truly a solo album. But I always wanted to form a full band, not only for live performance, but for future recordings. And so Joe stayed on board, thankfully, and then I was able to recruit a couple of just stellar musicians, also veterans of the Twin Cities music scene. John Funk on lead guitar, who's also become my co-songwriter. He and I co-wrote 3 tunes on the new record, and then we've got Benny Craig on bass. Both those guys are just, well, Joe too, of course, just phenomenal musicians. So the band, it's my name. It's a solo band, if you will. Those guys are kind of like my wingmen in a sense, but also we are definitely a band in that all of us are irreplaceable, frankly, in terms of just the band's chemistry, how well we gel both musically and as human beings. So I'd have to say this is probably the best band I've ever had since the original Dare Force years ago. So I'm extremely excited, and we're just getting going. I mean, this is the first studio album with the full band that we've released, and John and I are going to continue to write, more stuff together, and so we're just getting rolling.
Yeah, and you're, like I said, when I'll be honest, I watched the video first, okay, before I dove right into your full album. The video blew me away.
Well, thank you.
Just the video, whoever did the videography of this, really captured the sound, because you are an amazing guitar player.
Well, thank you. Well, it's funny you mentioned our videographers. They are the one and only the Jorgensens, who are actually fantastic musicians in their own right. They're a husband and wife team, Brianna and Kurt Jorgensen. They do all our videos. In fact, we're working up a second video right now for the second track, Take Me Down. We're in the midst of filming that. But they are truly on the Johnny O'Neill team. I mean, they've been with us since the first video we put out, Snake in the Grass, which was the first single from the first album. From that point on, they've done every video with us. The video that you just mentioned, Brand New Day, we released the album came out, and that's the title track. The album was released on June 21st. Happened to be my birthday in the summer solstice, but later that same week we dropped the video for the title track, and that's currently pushing 200,000 views on YouTube, on our YouTube channel as we speak. So we're going to crack, a couple $100 grand with that.
Oh yeah.
The new one, I will say this, if you like what you've seen so far, this next one is really going to blow your mind. They are extremely talented. They get the band completely. They know what we're about. And this next tune and what we have in mind for it, I think is really going to turn a lot of people's heads. So we're extremely excited.
Yeah, like I said, like the energy that I'm getting from your band, it's almost like you have to see you guys live to really kind of capture the essence and the feel of the blues as well as rock.
There is no doubt about that. I mean, it's hard to say which we love more, being in the studio or performing live. And of course, the two feed off of each other.
Right.
But there's nothing like a live performance, especially when you've got an audience in front of you that just dialed in, and there's this synergy between the audience. I mean, it's the adrenaline is the best drug in the world.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
There's nothing like a dose of adrenaline in front of a crowd of rockers that are just tuned into what you're doing. So we've got an opportunity to do that tomorrow. Actually, we're doing a show with Buck Cherry here in Minnesota. There's a few bands on the bill, and so after we wrap up with the interview, I'm going to be getting ready for that. We're going to leave bright and early tomorrow morning to head up north. It's an outdoor festival called Loon Fest of all things,
Okay.
but there's a few bands on the bill. There's a band called Ben Rez, which I think are essentially touring with Buck Cherry for most of their dates.
Yeah, he
Um,
actually came through here. I'm familiar with him. He's got a good band as well.
well, we do too. So
I
we're ready
know.
to we're
You
ready to
guys are a
bring it.
good company.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. We are so ready to bring it, and yeah, we're just pumped as hell for the show tomorrow. This is the stuff we live for. So
Right.
yeah.
Now, do you guys plan on playing more shows other than this one?
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, we haven't done an official release party for the new album yet. We're a release show. We're working on a venue for that. Our manager just started working with Foghat, our manager, Michael Brandvold. So we're talking about maybe getting on a show or two with them. There's a few things in the works that if you keep track of us on our Facebook site
Yeah.
and then the website, johnnyoneal.com, details will be forthcoming. But there's a lot of stuff that'll be happening here as the year rolls on.
Well, that's amazing. Let's talk a little bit. I'm going to dive into your album. Because there was a couple songs like In Search of, which I really loved. That's a great song.
Well, thank you. Andy Powell of Wishbone Ash thought the same thing, and that's exactly the influence that I drew from that tune. It's funny you mention it. I wrote that song when I was 20 years old, and during the days of Dare Force, we played it for a couple of years, never recorded it. Just one of those tunes that just kind of fell by the wayside. And while we were tracking the new album, Brian Bart, who I co-founded Dare Force with, has been my co-producer on both my solo albums. And so, we were in the studio together, and I was just riffing on that chord progression, which I had never forgot. And Brian looks at me, goes, "That's In Search of. You've got to record that." And I thought, okay. So it had been a song that I had not played in decades. And so I, got the rest of the band on board with the tune, and it really captures the two guitar uh, dynamics between John Funk and I. We certainly draw from bands like Thin Lizzy, and I mentioned Wishbone Ash. That
Yeah.
at the time that was something that really I was listening to heavily, and it's funny you mentioned that. I sent the track to Andy Powell, who's the original guitarist of Wishbone Ash, and he was kind enough to listen to it and got back to me and said, "This really resonates with me, and it's very strong," which I considered one of the nicest compliments I've ever received about a song I wrote. But
That's amazing because I'm a big Thin Lizzy fan, and I saw that you covered one of Phil Lynott's songs, "Don't Believe a Word If."
yeah,
Um,
yep.
he is an amazing talent. He is well missed. That song is amazing.
Well, thank you. And speaking of Phil Lynott, who again is just such a huge figure, influence in my songwriting. Thin Lizzy, I mean, we cut our teeth in Dare Force playing their tunes for years, but that's a good example of a songwriter who I try to emulate. Just a brilliant, not only a great bassist, voice, front man, a black dude from Ireland playing bass, and just one of the coolest frontmen ever, but also a fabulous storyteller. And
Yes.
that's something that I have tried to develop with my songwriting too, lyrically, is to, you know, instead of kind of going for the cliche, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I mean, there's a billion of those songs that have been written, and some really good ones too. But um, I like things that are out of the box, that take people to places they haven't been to before. Something that's more kind of cinematic, that has more of a just something that captures people's imagination.
Yeah, and that's important in music right now. That's kind of a trend. A lot of the original music bands, such as yourself, they're doing a few cover tunes here and there. That's no big deal. I call them tribute tunes because really doing a tribute to Phil Lynott, which is
Absolutely, and
amazing.
yeah, if I
That's
could,
where the trend is going.
yeah. Well, we want to be careful too. I mean, there's a plethora of tribute bands out there. In fact, one that we just did a show with, and they're very good friends of ours, Hairball. We played an outdoor festival with them just a few weeks ago. Those guys have got it down. I mean, they're excellent at what they do, but unfortunately, there's a glut of many others who fall far short of that mark. And so, in this day, trying to promote original music, obviously is challenging. But that's we wanted to do. Don't Believe a Word seemed to fit. It was a fitting tribute to Thin Lizzy and Phil Lynott, but the tune that precedes it is a song called Hands Up, and it's about again a fictional tale about a boxer from Dublin, Ireland, by the name of Seamus, who's coming into the local tavern, and I'm just sitting back having a few with my friends. I don't even have a clue as to who this guy is, and he's coming in looking for trouble, and it's like, hey, buddy, I got no bone to pick with you. But it's kind of a more of that kind of Stones Faces kind of barroom body type of rock and roll
Right.
tune. And then it segues right into Don't Believe a Word. It just seemed to be a really good um, tracking order with those two tunes back to back.
Yeah. Like I just interviewed a real young band yesterday, and I was explaining to them really the trend right now is 70s rock, which is, your band has, like I said, elements, of that vibe,
Well,
faces.
we that's when we cut our teeth. I mean,
Right.
late 70s through the late 80s. So I mean, that's baked in our DNA, but we don't want to be labeled as, a classic 70s rock. I mean, there's certainly elements of that, but we want to
Right, of
um,
course.
modernize it, develop it, take it even further. But bottom line, it's all about the songs. And I don't care how good a guitarist or singer you are, um, you got to be able to write. I mean, if you're gonna, put out your own material, it damn well better be something worth listeners' time. And so that's something that I really have spent a lot of time and energy on, is not only develop myself as a singer and musician, but also really honing in on songwriting. John Funk and we're our goal is to become the next Jagger Richards. So, and I mean,
Nice.
I'm being totally serious when I say that. I, you
Hey,
know,
it
we aim,
all starts with an idea.
we aim high, and we do not settle for something that's doesn't meet our standards. So,
Right.
yeah,
But rock music in general, coming from the Midwest, that's in my DNA. Okay. Because I grew up with REO Speedwagon, Cheap Trick,
sure, yeah,
Sticks,
yeah. Funny you mentioned
bands
Cheap
like
Trick.
that.
Yeah, there's a two.
Kansas.
Yep.
These are
Well,
all timeless bands.
yeah,
And
we've done. I opened for Kansas with Dare Force. Funny you mentioned Cheap Trick. We had a couple lead singers come and go in Dare Force. The first of whom was a cat. His real name was Randall Hogan, but his stage name is Zeno. Zeno was the original singer in Cheap Trick before Robin Zander. Those two went to high school together,
oh
actually.
wow,
And
Rockford,
so,
huh?
yeah. So Robin Zander came out and saw Dare Force. I've met Rick Nielsen, been out to his house, seen his guitar collection. Cool stuff like that. But on the album, it's kind of the power ballad, if you will. It's a song called "It's Too Hard to Say Goodbye." And Zeno wrote that tune while he was in Dare Force. Again, another song that, we did actually record it with Dare Force at a studio called Blackberry Way, which went on to become Twin Tone Records, and they recorded a bunch of punk acts like Husker Du and oh gosh, who else? Soul Asylum, cats like that. But that's on the album as well, and so it's again going back to that 70s DNA, but yet trying to modernize it and bring people back, show newer listeners or younger listeners that, hey, this is the roots of what we're
Right.
all about.
It's
So
rock history,
yeah,
and I mean, these younger bands, they got to take listen, because let me tell you, those bands laid down the foundation for everything that's happening right now.
yeah.
Rock and roll.
Let me I'm really let me try and cut this guy off here, who's cutting my grass. Just a second.
Okay.
Hold on. Apologies.
No worries. So anyway, rock and roll, I think, is definitely rooted in the Midwest. And I mean, you guys have a great rock and roll sound. Let's talk about, what are your favorite artists?
Well, of course, I mean, there isn't a musician on the planet that hasn't been influenced by the Beatles. I mean, that's, they are in their own echelon, to be sure. But, certainly the greats, Zeppelin, I've already mentioned the Stones, Thin Lizzy, UFO, another huge influence, Michael Schenker, in my estimation, one of the greatest lead guitarists of all time. Excuse me. I mentioned Wishbone Ash earlier. Other bands that I really love, Stone Temple Pilots, another killer band that again really captures a really wide sonic landscape. Scott Weiland was a great storyteller and lyricist frontman. Alice in Chains is another band that just love their stuff. Um, let's see here, Rival Sons. They've got some really cool stuff. Greta Van Fleet, I've gotten a kick out of. That they've done probably as good a job as you can at attempting to be a Zeppelin tribute band without actually, being an all-out
Right?
tribute band. But if they claim to not have watched any Zeppelin footage or listened to any Zeppelin albums, well,
Yeah, they're
give me
definitely
a
a
break.
visual band for sure.
Yeah, yeah, but they're fun. Judas Priest is another one. But in the blues, though, too, you mentioned that. I love playing slide guitar. And so there's a track on the album When Janie Came Into Town, which is, kind of goes back to good old childhood, teenage lust. And I played the track on the beginning of the tune starts off on a 1932 National Resonator guitar. And that's an old blues slide guitar. And so people like Johnny Winter, huge influence on my playing in terms of the blues and slide guitar. Allman Brothers, Dare Force, we actually had Dickie Betts and Greg Allman come out to see us play at a club here in town. This was back in the late 70s. They got up and did 4 tunes with our rhythm section. Greg Allman actually plays a pretty decent guitar. He played my Flying V that night. So we're definitely influenced by the blues as well, but we're at the core we're a guitar based band, but on this record too we've got elements. Well, My Mona, the third track, really is a departure from kind of the stereotypical 2 guitar hard rock stuff. There isn't a guitar solo on that song by design, but there is a killer sax solo by a cat by the name of Jason Peterson Dallaire, who also is in Michael Bolton's touring band. He tours the world. But when I talked to him, I said, Jason, I want you to channel Bobby Keys, who was the Stones saxophonist. He plays the solo on Brown Sugar and all kinds of stuff. And so we had him on a few tracks. Jason also plays organ and piano as well on several tracks. And then I mentioned earlier the Jorgensens, our videographer as well. Brianna is also a great musician and singer in her own right. The Jorgensens have their own band and several releases out. She's on backup vocals on a couple tracks too on the record. So again, we at the core, we're a two guitar hard rock band, but there's so much more. If you start peeling the layers off, and we really want to do something that's different, that really stands apart. And I think the great bands, what they do is they're able to tap into different genres and textures, but yet you always know who it is. Zeppelin's a prime
Right.
example of that. And everything from, kind of acoustic, almost folk tunes to just the crankiness hard rock stuff you can think of. That's what we're aiming for.
Right.
We want to be that kind of, well, we are that kind of band.
Yeah.
So.
And you play Gibson.
I primarily play Gibsons. Yes, I would have to say that's, my Gibson and Marshall.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, what else needs to be said? But I will say though that I have started opening my mind to some Fender guitars. Actually, John Funk, our other co-lead guitarist, is big on Fender Tellys and plays Telecasters on some tracks. And those guitars have a really cool edge to them. They're a cleaner sound, but they still lend themselves to hard rock. And so I don't want to say I'm exclusively a Gibson guy, but yeah, the majority of guitars I own are
Yeah, he's an
Gibsons.
amazing guitar player. Also, you two really mesh really well.
Thank you. John is an incredible guitarist, and I would say that it is really like capturing magic in the bottle when you find another guitarist that you connect with musically, your playing styles mesh, not to mention your songwriting styles mesh. John's the best partner I've had since Brian Bart and I started Dare Force. So I consider myself extremely fortunate to have him at my side. Fantastic guitarist. Not only that, he is one hell of a performer. And you mentioned earlier about the energy of the band coming through on the video. Well, come check us out live. He and Benny, my bass guitarist, those guys, I'm at the front. I've got a guitar on my neck and I'm often at the mic. Those guys are tearing it up on my side,
I know you can't
my
see
left and
him,
right.
but yeah.
But I mean, the energy is palpable. So it just is such a gas to perform with these guys. It really is fun.
What was the first concert that you ever saw?
The first show that I ever saw, well, that's an interesting tale. There's a club here in town, you might have heard of it, called First Avenue. It's a
Yes.
iconic,
Princess Club, as they call it.
Yeah. Well, First Avenue started off as a refurbished Greyhound bus depot, and it was originally called the Depot. It opened in 1970. My first concert was my birthday in 1970. I won't tell you how old I was at the time, but let me say I was far younger than drinking age at the time. But the first show I saw was Alice Cooper in June of 1970, and Love It to Death hadn't been released yet, but they were playing tracks off of the album. They played I'm 18, a bunch of other tracks. My mind was just completely blown. I had heard of the band and had never seen them, of course, but after that, man, I was just, and this was the original Alice Cooper, and
Right. The
they were,
original
yes,
concept that he did.
yeah, Michael Bruce, their guitarist, who co-wrote so many of their hit tunes, the Love It to Death and the Killer albums in particular are just phenomenal. So that was my first rock show, and it was quite a beginning. But I'd have to say that what really was the impetus for me being a musician. I and it's a flashbulb memory, but I saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan, dating myself, but I did
I
see that
read that in
show.
your bio that really, as a child, really resonated with you and left
That
a,
was it.
yeah.
I saw that, and I'd heard, some of their stuff on the radio before I saw them, on this Sullivan show. I saw that and I thought, okay, I know what I want to do. And just from that point on, just proceeded to bug my parents incessantly to buy me a guitar, which they did. I got my first electric when I was 8 years old. I've been playing ever since. So,
Wow.
um, but yeah, I mean that just seared a memory into my brain, and just I mean it was like being struck by lightning or something. And they were such a sociocultural phenomenon, not only just incredible musicians, but I mean how they affected the world in terms of everything from politics, sex, drugs, religion, philosophy, fashion. I mean, it just we'll never see the likes of them again. Let's put it that way.
Right. That's like a one in a million right there.
Yeah, yeah. But I was fortunate enough to. I mean, that's my grandmother used to buy me Beatles albums for birthday presents and so forth. And
Oh,
so, I
wow.
remember holed up in my bedroom, spinning the White Album, and just being so blown away by their range of musicality. But as time went on, certainly got into more harder stuff. Jimi Hendrix would be another one, of course,
Right.
probably the greatest rock guitarist of all time. Um, but I think, going back to songwriting, I think that's one thing that's become kind of a lost art in some ways, and it's unfortunate. But I think some of the golden days of the best songwriting, probably, late 60s through early 80s, really, some awesome songwriting. And over time, it seems like that's become kind of fallen by the wayside. Also, the concept of an album instead of just singles. These days everyone is, they're streaming a single here and there, but the idea of an album as a concept or a total package. And so really asking the listener to spend some time listening from track 1 to track 10 and just kind of seeing how the whole thing plays out as a work of art, above and beyond just another single that you're putting out. So
Right.
that's another thing we're
And I
trying to.
mean, that's kind of a trend, but, um, you know, I was interviewing bands through pandemic. So a lot of these bands were breaking up as I was interviewing them. So
Yeah,
a lot of these bands that I interviewed, they were writing for the first time. They did not go anywhere. A lot of these musicians were on the road 24/7. So they starting to hone in on writing and so forth. And now a lot of those songs, like you did in pandemic, you were writing, they're coming to fruition now.
yes, and absolutely. I mean, that was such a surreal time in our world's history, but it also provided a prime opportunity to really focus on songwriting. And of course, it was the start of my solo career. And um, I'm just so excited. I mean, I've got killer musicians. I've got, Brian Bart, my co-producer, is like, is my playing probably as well as I do. Our videographers, our management. I mean, there's so much that's happened in the span of not even 3 years. If anyone would have told me in 2020 that this is where things are happening in mid 2023, I would have been pleasantly surprised. I mean, I'm just so pumped. And like I said before, we're a new band. I mean, I've certainly been around the block a few times, but in terms of Johnny O'Neill as a solo artist in a band, that's something that we're the new kids on the block in some ways, ironically enough. So and there's tons of great bands out there, and as you know, trying to capture people's attention and stand out and get your music heard and hopefully maybe sell a few units. Yeah, it's challenging, but we welcome the challenge, and we definitely have the goods to bring it. So
Yeah. So what are your plans now? You have the show with Buck Cherry tomorrow. Right?
yep.
Okay.
Yeah, we're gonna do, actually we're gonna do a kind of a again, thinking outside the box. There's an iconic music store, a record store here in town called No Name Records. The store owner, Danny Beck, has been a huge supporter of Dare Force and my solo work. He's got our albums in stock right now at a store. And Danny, over the years, has had bands play in his store. So we're going to do a stripped down, we're going to play the full
Nice.
album, kind of a stripped down version of it. That's September 30th. No Name Records is in Minneapolis, 60th in Portland. But we'll probably do a free show, kind of a chance for people to really get to know us, close up and personal, very intimate setting. Something that, we haven't done before, but it gives us a chance to really dive into the songs, kind of get a dialogue with the people that are there, talk about how the stories of the songs. People are always interested to find out the background of songs and how they were created and so forth. So
Right. Like a storyteller.
yeah. So we're going to have, a chance to kind of have some dialogue back and forth with people who come, and we'll be having all sorts of goodies to give away and that kind of thing. But beyond that, we're gearing up for a release show later in the year, and essentially already looking ahead to 2024. And we've got a couple of agents that we're working with, and so there's some shows on the horizon. I details of which will be forthcoming, but again, I mean, there's already shows getting booked into 2024, a lot of the
Yeah.
festivals and so forth.
Yeah. A
So
lot of bands are already releasing some of their 2024 dates.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah. But you've
So
got a great start, Johnny. You're an amazing songwriter. I really enjoy listening to your music, and I'm sure my viewers will as well.
well, Carol, I can't thank you enough, and I really appreciate, first of all, thank you for taking the time and attention to listen.
Yes.
So many times, especially with radio these days. I mean, I'm crazy enough to still try and get us some play on terrestrial stations, and we have broken through on a number of stations that actually were kind enough. If they take 5 minutes to listen to a track, we can win them over. But it's
Right.
getting the person to listen. And so, first of all, thank you for taking the time and attention to listen, and also thank you so much for having me on your show. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about my music and my band, and that's always really fun. So,
Yeah. And we look forward to seeing you in Vegas at some point.
well, we have a fellow that lives in Phoenix. I won't say any more than that, but we are looking at some shows out west. We also have some connections in Europe too. And again, a lot of this stuff I can't. I
Yeah,
mean,
you're good,
I
but
don't.
we're gonna keep in touch.
Oh,
Okay.
there's going to be a lot more news coming
Yeah.
ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. So definitely keep in touch with me. One thing I did want to mention, you need to be on TikTok.
Funny you mentioned that, because that's in the works too. I just
Good.
talked to my manager about getting a TikTok channel going. Yes, we are. That's happening as we speak. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's super important, and make sure when you do hashtags, you put rock for you
Okay.
in a hashtag.
All right.
That's gonna help you. Of course, for you, everybody puts for you, but rock for you is gonna
Mhm.
give you more circulation, more algorithms.
Yeah. Well,
Just a little, just a little
hey,
something that I'd leave with
I
you.
I appreciate any and all suggestions, and that's a great one, and something that we're on right now. The other thing too is the videos are just a gas. I mean, we have so much fun doing those, and that's a whole nother avenue. And I think we've got just a great videography team,
Yeah.
and it really captures the band's energy. So we're going to be releasing more of those, and so between the, you know, the recorded music and the visual stuff and live performance, you know, there's a whole lot of momentum that
You got
is
a whole
just
package,
building.
Johnny. Why don't you let the viewers know where they can find you on social media?
Well, probably the, you know, the main source, of course, the usual suspects. We're on Facebook, Instagram. We have a YouTube channel. Our website, johnnyoneil.com. That's JOHNNYONEIL.com, no apostrophe. We're on Spotify, all, you know, all the streaming sites. But I would say probably our official Facebook page and our website are probably the two best places to, you know, find out more about what the band's up to and, you know, latest dates and videos and that kind of stuff. So,
Well, it was great talking to you. Let's keep in touch because I want to hear everything that's going on with your band. Um, you have an amazing band, and I look forward to seeing more videos and live performances.
absolutely, Carol. And thank you so much. It's been my pleasure. Just had such a nice time chatting with you today. And thank you so much for your interest and support. That means the world.
Absolutely.
So we will certainly be keeping in touch.
Yes,
Trust me.
and we'll talk again.
Okay. Sounds great. You got it.
Okay, take care.
You two have a great weekend.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Johnny O'Neill, what an amazing individual. Very interesting how he got into rock and roll as a child, watching the Beatles. That was a light bulb moment for him. So definitely watch out for Johnny O'Neill and his band making their way through the U.S. They have a big show with Buck Cherry tomorrow in upper, I think, Minnesota. So definitely keep them on your radar. This is Carol Nevin, the Vegas Rock Goddess, and I will see you next time.